Drifting into music, silence, the merchant vessel thermal wind tumbled. Through the void without power, music. Without direction, without hope, its hull bore the scars of plasma fire, jag. Tears that exposed inner compartments too. Vacuum, 3 of those compartments now served as tombs for crew members who had died in the first moments of the attack. The remaining 5 Calvarians huddled. The bridge section, the only pressurized space left intact, Captain then pressed his scaled hand against the frozen viewport, his breath no longer fogged. The glass, the environmental systems had failed hours ago, and now the cold crept through every surface. His species could endure lower temperatures than most, but not indefinitely, not like this. He pulled his hand back and flexed his fingers, watching them move slowly. Stiffly, frostbite would claim them soon. If the lack of oxygen did not claim his consciousness first, behind him his navigator Sis worked at a dead console, her claws tapping uselessly against buttons that no longer responded. She had stopped speaking too. Hours earlier, everyone understood there was nothing left to say. The ship's emergency beacon had transmitted for exactly 14 minutes before the backup generator died. That signal had traveled into empty space, into a region no rescue vessel would ever enter. They floated in the hollow expanse, a sector of space that appeared on no trade maps and existed in navigational databases only. As a warning, ships that entered this region sometimes disappeared completely. Others emerged decades later as lifeless hulks, their crews gone without explanation. Most civilizations treated the hollow expanse as a natural barrier, a place where space itself seemed broken. Pirates knew this. They had chased the thermal wind across the boundary, fired until the merchant ship could no longer maneuver, then retreated back to safer territory. No one would follow, no one would witness, no one would care. Then looked at his crew. Celis at the dead console, engineer Vork slumped against the wall, his breathing shallow and irregular. Medical officer Trenny sat beside the sealed compartment that held their dead, her eyes closed as if sleeping. Communications officer Pellin stared at the ceiling, his mouth moving in silent prayer to gods that seemed very distant. Now, these were good people, experienced traders who had survived difficult routes, navigated dangerous negotiations, escaped storms and raiders, but the hollow expanse did not care about experience. It did not distinguish between the worthy and the unworthy. It simply consumed everything that entered. The captain pulled himself to the center of the bridge and activated his personal recorder. His hands shook as he pressed the controls. If anyone ever found this vessel, they deserved to know what happened. He spoke slowly, his voice rough from thirst and cold air. This is Captain then of the merchant vessel Thermal Wind Registry, K-7749, registered to the Calvarian Trade Confederation. We were attacked by pirate vessels approximately 19 hours ago while carrying medical supplies to the outer colonies. They pursued us into the hollow expanse. Our ship is severely damaged. Life support has failed. We have 3 dead and 5 living, but the living will not remain so much longer. He paused, gathering strength. We attempted to reach anyone within signal range. No response came. We understand why no sane captain enters this region. If you find this recording, please inform our families that we did not abandon our cargo or our duty. We simply Ran out of time, he deactivated the recorder and let it drift from his hand. The small device floated across the bridge, spinning slowly, then watched it move, his mind growing distant. Perhaps this was better than struggling. Perhaps acceptance brought its own form of peace. His eyes began to close. Then Vork spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Captain Energy signature. Then's eyes snapped open. He pushed himself toward the engineering station, where Vork pointed at a portable scanner, one of the few devices still functioning on battery power. The display showed a reading that made no sense. Something massive was approaching their position, something generating power levels that exceeded any ship in the known database. The signature pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost alive. That cannot be accurate, Sally said. Her voice, nothing that large could move through this region. The spatial distortions would tear it apart, but the reading did not change. It grew stronger. The disabled merchant vessel began to vibrate, a subtle tremor that traveled through the hull. Loose objects drifted faster, responding to gravitational fluctuations, then grabbed a support rail and pulled himself to the viewport. At first he saw only darkness, the same infinite black that had surrounded them for hours. Then something changed. Space itself began to twist. A point of light appeared in the distance, blue and brilliant, like a star being born, but it did not behave like a star. It elongated, stretched, became a line that carved through reality. The line widened into a crack, and through that crack poured light that should not exist in this dead region. The light took shape, became something solid, something incomprehensibly large. Spirits protect us, Trennies whispered. What is that? A ship emerged from the impossible rift in space, not slowly, not cautiously, but with absolute confidence, as if it owned the very fabric of reality. The vessel was enormous, dwarfing their merchant craft by hundreds of times. Its hull gleamed with a dark metallic finish that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. Energy fields shimmered across its surface in geometric patterns that hurt to observe directly. Design was utterly foreign, following principles that no Calvarian engineer would recognize. The ship completed its emergence, and the dimensional rift sealed behind it, space healing itself like torn flesh, closing without scar. The massive vessel rotated slowly, and across its bow then could see markings in an angular script, 3 letters that meant nothing to him. HSS unknown origin, Vorth said, his voice trembling. That technology, it folded space. They traveled through dimensions we cannot even theorize about. The communication console crackled to life, powered somehow by an external signal. Static filled the bridge. Then a voice spoke in a language none of them understood. The words were harsh, clipped but not aggressive. After a moment the signal adjusted, and the words became comprehensible through translation protocols. Disabled vessel. This is HSS Resolute. We have detected your distress beacon, echo, and life signs. Maintain your current position. Do not attempt to activate any propulsion systems. We are initiating rescue protocols. The 5 Calvarians stared at each other in disbelief. Rescue protocols in the hollow expanse from a species they had never encountered. Then's mind struggled to process what he was hearing. Who would build ships capable of dimensional travel just to patrol empty space? Who would risk entering the most dangerous region in known space to save stranded merchants before anyone could respond. The massive ship extended mechanical arms from its underbelly. These were not crude grappling tools but elegant structures that moved with fluid precision. Energy fields formed between the arms, creating a containment net that enveloped the thermal wind without touching its damaged hull. The merchant vessel stopped tumbling. Its chaotic drift became stable, controlled movement. They were being pulled toward the larger ship, drawn into its belly, like a child being carried to safety. They are not asking for identification, Selly said quietly, not demanding payment, not questioning why we are here. They simply came for us. A docking bay opened in the side of the massive vessel, large enough to swallow their entire ship whole. Warm light spilled from the opening, golden and inviting. As they crossed the threshold, then felt heat beginning to return to his fingers. The bay door sealed behind them, and atmospheric pressure stabilized around their hull. Through the viewport they could see figures moving toward them, bipedal beings in advanced environmental suits. The airlock of the thermal wind opened from the outside. Unsealed by technology, the Calvarians did not possess. A rush of warm, oxygen-rich air entered the bridge, then gasped involuntarily, his lungs suddenly remembering how to function properly. The suited figures entered, moving with practiced efficiency. They carried medical equipment and scanning devices that hummed with power. One of the beings approached Thren directly and lifted its helmet visor. The face beneath was unlike any species in Calvarian records. Smooth skin, forward-facing eyes, features that seemed impossibly expressive. The being spoke, and this time the words came clearly through a translation device. Captain, I'm Lieutenant Chin of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. You and your crew are safe now. My medical team will treat your injuries and stabilize your condition. Your vessel will be repaired sufficiently for you to reach the nearest station, or we can transport you directly if you prefer. You have nothing to fear. Then tried to speak, but his voice failed. This being, this human, spoke of repair and transport as if they were simple matters, as if dimensional travel and resurrection from the edge of death were routine procedures. He managed a single question, his voice breaking. What? Why did you come here? The human's expression changed, forming what then would later learn was called a smile. Because someone needed help. That is reason enough. More humans entered the bridge, moving among the Calvarian crew with gentle competence. They administered injections that brought warmth flooding back through frozen limbs. They wrapped thermal blankets around shivering bodies. They spoke in quiet, reassuring tones while their scanners assessed damage, and their hands provided comfort. Within minutes, the 5 survivors were being guided out of their dying ship and into corridors filled with light and life. As then walked through the docking bay of the human vessel, supported by beings who owed him nothing and asked for nothing in return. A thought formed in his exhausted mind. His people had mapped the stars, built trade empires, negotiated treaties with dozens of species, but they had never encountered anyone who patrolled the void itself, who entered the places where all others feared to go simply because someone might need saving. These humans were either the most foolish species in the galaxy or the most dangerous. Then suspected they might be both, and for reasons he could not yet articulate. That thought gave him more hope than he had felt in years, the debt that cannot be paid. Captain then opened his eyes to soft light and the gentle hum of machinery. For a moment he could not remember where he was or how he had arrived. His body felt warm, comfortable, completely free of pain. This confused him more than anything else. The last clear memory he possessed was of freezing slowly to death aboard his own bridge, watching his crew fade into silence. Yet now he lay on a surface that adjusted to his body's shape in a room filled with clean air and precise temperature control. He sat up slowly and looked around. The medical bay was unlike anything in Calvarian design. The walls curved seamlessly into the ceiling, embedded with displays that showed biological data in formats he could partially recognize. His own vital signs pulsed steadily on the nearest screen, translated into his native mathematical system. Beside his bed, a container held water and what appeared to be nutritional supplements. Everything was arranged for his convenience, designed for his specific biology. Across the room he could see his crew in similar beds. Celis was already awake, speaking quietly with a human medical officer. Vorkth appeared to be sleeping peacefully, his breathing deep and regular. Trennies and Pellin were sitting up, examining their own hands as if surprised to find them still attached and functional. All 5 of them had survived. All 5 had been restored from the edge of death. A door slid open with a whisper of air, and the human lieutenant from before entered. Without the environmental suit, Then could see the being more clearly. The human wore uniform of dark blue fabric with insignia he did not recognize. The being moved with confidence but without aggression, a combination that seemed uniquely human. Captain Thin, the lieutenant said, nodding respectfully. I'm pleased to see you conscious and recovering. My name is Marcus Chin. I serve as Chief Medical Officer aboard the Resolute. How do you feel, then? Flexed his fingers, rolled his shoulders, took a deep breath. Everything functioned perfectly, better than perfectly. Some old injuries he had carried for years seemed diminished, as if the human medical technology had repaired damage he no longer noticed. I feel as though I should be dead, he said honestly, yet I am not. Your medicine is remarkably advanced. We have had much practice, Chin replied. Frontier teaches harsh lessons, and we learned them well. You and your crew suffered severe hypothermia, oxygen deprivation, and the beginning stages of radiation exposure from your damaged reactor shielding. We have treated all of these conditions. You will experience some fatigue for another day or 2, but full recovery is certain. Then stood testing his legs. They held his weight. Without trembling, he looked directly at the human. I must speak with your captain. There are matters of debt and obligation that require immediate discussion. Chen's expression shifted into that same configuration Then had seen before, the one that involved the corners of the mouth moving upward. The smile. Captain Miranda Chin is expecting you. She is my sister, though we serve in different capacities. If you feel strong enough, I will escort you to the command deck. They walked through corridors that seemed designed for efficiency and comfort in equal measure. The floors provided perfect traction for various species foot structures. The lighting adjusted subtly as they moved, maintaining optimal visibility without strain. They passed other humans going about their duties, and each one nodded respectfully to then as if his presence aboard was completely ordinary. No one stared at his reptilian features or showed fear of his claws. They simply acknowledged him and continued their work. The command deck was vast and organized with military precision. Stations arranged in concentric circles around a central platform where a human woman stood examining a three-dimensional star map. She was older than the lieutenant, her dark hair her face marked with lines that spoke of experience and decision. When she turned to face then, her eyes were sharp and measuring but not unkind. "Captain then of the thermal wind," she said, her voice carrying authority that needed no amplification. "I am Captain Miranda Chen of the HSS Resolute. Welcome aboard. I trust my brother has taken good care of you and your crew." Then performed the Calvorian gesture of formal respect, pressing his clawed hand to his chest. "Captain Shin, your crew has saved 5 lives that were certainly lost. My people have protocols for such debts. I must negotiate terms of repayment, whether in currency, trade, goods, or future service. The debt is substantial and must be honored." The human captain studied him for a long moment, then gestured to the star map. "Tell me, Captain, then, what do you see when you look at this?" Then approached the holographic display. It showed a vast section of space, thousands of star systems connected by trade routes and territorial boundaries. But there were gaps, large regions marked in red or left completely blank. He recognized the hollow expanse immediately, a dark void in the center of the map where no routes passed. "I see the known galaxy," he said carefully, "the spaces we inhabit and the spaces we avoid." "Exactly," said, "the spaces we avoid. Every species in this region has made the same calculation. Certain areas are too dangerous, too unpredictable, too empty of value to justify exploration or patrol. The hollow expanse, the drift margins, the ghost lanes, the silent reaches, these places exist between civilizations, and everyone has agreed to simply pretend they do not exist." She manipulated the display, and the red zones expanded, growing larger. "Do you know how much space that represents?" "Nearly 40% of this entire sector, 40% of reality that we collectively abandoned because it was inconvenient or frightening." Then said nothing, unsure where this was leading. Captain Chin continued, her voice taking on an intensity that commanded attention. 70 years ago, a human colony ship suffered a catastrophic drive failure. They drifted for 8 months in a region similar to this one, a dead zone that no one patrolled, 15,000 humans slowly dying while they waited for rescue that never came. They transmitted constantly, begging for help from anyone who could hear. "Do you know how many ships passed close enough to detect their signal?" She paused. 17 different vessels from 7 different species detected that signal and chose not to respond. The risk was too great. The reward was too small. The colony ship was eventually found by a human explorer who ignored all warnings and entered the forbidden zone specifically to search for them. 3,000 people survived, 12,000 did not. The command deck had grown quiet. Every human within earshot had stopped their work to listen, though they must have heard this story many times before. Captain Chen's voice softened but lost none of its power. That explorer's name was Captain Sarah Akin Kuo. She was my grandmother, and when she returned with those Survivors, she made a promise to the families of the dead. She swore that humanity would never again allow the void to claim lives that could be saved. She swore that humans would patrol the empty places, the forgotten places, the places where everyone else refused to go. Not for profit, not for territory. Simply because consciousness is rare and precious in this universe, and it deserves protection regardless of species or circumstance. Then felt something shifting in his understanding of these beings. You patrol the hollow expanse because of a promise made by one person 70 years ago. We patrol because it is right, Chin corrected. My grandmother simply articulated what humanity had always believed. We are a young species, Captain. Then we have been traveling the stars for less than 2 centuries. We lack the ancient knowledge of the Calvarians, the technological sophistication of the Zen. 3. The economic power of the merchant confederations. What we have is a belief that civilization means something more than mutual profit. It means mutual protection. It means no one floats alone in the dark if we can prevent it. She gestured and the star map changed, showing dozens of ships like the Resolute positioned throughout the red zones. We have 47 vessels dedicated to frontier patrol. They travel through dimensional folds to cover distances that would take years through normal space. They respond to any distress signal from any species without question or condition. In the past 70 years, we have rescued more than 200,000 beings from certain death. Some of those beings were from species currently at war with humanity. We rescued them anyway. Then mind reeled. The resources required for such an operation must be staggering. The risk to human lives enormous. And for what? For strangers, for potential enemies. This is madness, he said quietly. No civilization can sustain such generosity. Eventually your people will realize the cost exceeds any possible benefit. Captain Chin smiled, and this time then understood. The expression carried sadness along with determination, perhaps, but until that day comes, we will continue to keep our grandmother's promise. Which brings me to your concern about debt, Captain. Then you owe us nothing. We do not rescue lives to create obligations. We rescue lives because that is what our species has chosen to be. That is not acceptable. Then said, his voice rising. Despite his exhaustion, my culture does not permit such imbalance. If I cannot repay this debt, it will burden my family for generations. There must be something we can offer: information, technology, trade agreements, anything. The human captain regarded him thoughtfully, then made a decision. Very well, if you insist on payment, I will tell you what humanity asks. When you encounter someone in need, someone drifting in the dark, someone that your calculations tell you is not worth the risk of saving, remember this day. Remember that you were pulled from the void by beings who had never met you and never expected anything in return, and then make your own choice about what kind of civilization you want to build. Before then could respond, an alert chimed across the command deck. A human officer called out from a nearby station. Captain, we have detected another distress signal. Coordinates. Placing it in the ghost lanes, approximately 4 light years from our current position. Signal is weak and fragmented. Captain Chin moved to the central display immediately. Can you identify the vessel? Negative, Captain. However, the energy signature matches Kree military specifications. Every human on the bridge tensed, then understood why the Kree sovereignty was currently engaged in border conflicts with human colonies. 3 months earlier, Kree raiders had destroyed a human mining station, killing everyone aboard. The species were not formally at war, but neither were they anywhere close to peace, and now a Kree vessel drifted, helpless in the same kind of void that had nearly claimed the thermal wind. Then watched Captain Chen's face. This was the test of everything she had just proclaimed. Would humans truly rescue their enemies? Would they risk their lives for beings who had murdered their people? The captain did not hesitate. Set course for the distress signal. Prepare for dimensional fold in 15 minutes. Medical teams to stand by. Engineering, ready the recovery systems. She turned to then, Captain, I must ask you to return to medical bay with your crew. We are about to enter a potentially hostile situation, and I cannot guarantee your safety on the command deck. You are truly going to save them? Then said, not quite, believing despite everything he had witnessed. You are going to save the Kree? I'm going to save whoever is drifting in that void, Chin replied firmly. Their government's choices are not my concern. Their lives are. Then returned to medical bay as instructed, his mind churning with thoughts he could not fully articulate. His crew gathered around him, all of them recovered enough to understand what was happening. They stood together at the observation port and watched as the Resolute prepared for another impossible journey. The ship thrummed with power. Space began to fold around them, reality bending to human will and human technology. The dimensional rift opened like a wound in the universe, and the Resolute plunged through without fear, racing toward beings who might try to kill their rescuers the moment they regained strength, racing because that was what humans did, racing because a promise made 70 years ago still echoed through their culture, binding them to principles that defied logic in economics and self-preservation. The rift closed behind them, and they were gone, swallowed by the spaces between, spaces traveling through dimensions that should not exist to reach people who probably did not deserve saving. Then watched the normal space return outside the viewport and felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of the universe. His people had always believed that survival belonged to the clever, the strong, the ones who made profitable calculations. Humans had proven that survival could also belong to the foolish, the stubborn, the ones who refused to accept that some lives were not worth the cost of rescue, and somehow, impossibly, the humans were winning. They were expanding, thriving, becoming a power that older species watched with confusion and growing respect. What are they? Sis whispered beside him. What kind of species builds ships that can tear through reality just to patrol empty space? Then thought about Captain Chen's grandmother, about a promise kept for 70 years, about humans diving into danger for beings who were actively trying to destroy them. He thought about the debt he could not repay and the payment he had been given. Instead, a choice, a challenge, a question about what kind of civilization the Calvarians wanted to be. I do not know what they are, then said slowly, but I know what they are trying to become. They are trying to become what they believe civilization should be, not what it is, but what it could be, and they are willing to die for that belief. The Resolute completed its dimensional transition and emerged in the ghost lanes. Through the viewport then could see another damaged vessel tumbling in the void. He could see the Kralith markings on its hull. He could see human rescue teams already launching toward it, already extending their impossible arms to catch another dying ship, already preparing to save lives that logic dictated they should abandon. He thought about returning home, about the report he would file with the Calvarian Trade Confederation. How could he possibly explain what he had witnessed? How could he describe a species that patrolled the emptiness itself, that offered rescue without conditions, that kept promises across generations, even when those promises cost them dearly? The medical officer, Marcus Chin, approached with documentation for their release. Your ship has been repaired sufficiently for travel to the nearest trade station, he said. We have also transmitted your location and situation to Calvarian authorities. They should be able to reach you within 3 days if you prefer to wait for your own people, or we can transport you directly to any destination within 12 light years. Choice is yours. Then accepted the documentation but did not look at it. He kept his eyes on the viewport, watching humans risk themselves for Kree warriors who would likely show no gratitude. Lieutenant Chin, he said quietly, may I ask you a personal question? Of course, Captain. Do you ever question this? Do you ever wonder if your species is simply throwing away resources and lives on beings who will never appreciate the sacrifice? Marcus Chin followed his gaze to the rescue operation. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute conviction. Every single day, and every single day, we decide that the alternative is worse. The alternative is becoming the kind of species that makes calculations about whose life is worth saving, the kind that draws lines and says these people matter and those people do not, the kind that lets the void claim whoever it wants because intervention is inconvenient. He paused, then added softly, my grandmother used to say that civilization is not measured by the height of our buildings or the speed of our ships. It is measured by how we treat those who cannot help us in return. By that standard, Captain, then humanity has a very long way to go, but we are trying. Every day in every empty corner of space we are trying. Then watch the Kree vessel being drawn into the Resolute's docking bay. He watched human medical teams preparing to save beings who saw them as enemies. He watched Captain Miranda Chin coordinating the rescue with the same absolute focus she had shown when saving 5 Calvarian merchants. No different, no less important, no calculation of worth or value or political convenience. Just consciousness in danger and humans responding because that was what humans did. We will wait for our own transport. Then said finally, but before we depart, I would like to speak with Captain Chin. Once more, there are things I need to say, things my government needs to hear. I will arrange it, Marcus Chin said, and left to attend to the new arrivals. Then stood at the viewport with his crew, watching humans work miracles in the darkness, watching them fulfill promises that should have died generations ago, watching them patrol the void itself, simply because someone needed to and no one else would. He thought about the choice Captain Chin had given him. Remember this day, she had said. Remember and make your own choice. You would remember. He would return to his people and describe what he had seen. He would tell them about the species that guarded empty space that rescued, enemies that kept grandmothers, promises across 70 years of cold. Reality he would tell them about, humans, and he would ask the question that now burned in his mind. If a young species barely 2 centuries old could choose compassion over calculation, could maintain such principles despite enormous cost, could patrol the darkness itself for no reward except the knowledge that consciousness survived another day, what did that say about older civilizations who had long ago decided such efforts were impractical? What did it say about the Calvarians who had abandoned the hollow expanse to its silence? What did it say about the dozens of species who had detected that human colony ship and chosen not to respond? What did it say about empires built on profitable calculations that never accounted for the weight of a single life? Outside the viewport, the rescue continued, humans and Crit working together in crisis. Even as their governments prepared for war, the void had claimed neither. The darkness had been pushed back one more time, and somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, the ghost of Captain Sarah Akona smiled, knowing her promise still echoed through her species, still called them to impossible duty, still made them the kind of civilization that patrolled the places where all others feared to go. Then pressed his hand against the viewport, feeling the faint vibration of the Resolute's engines. He whispered a prayer in his native language, not to distant gods, but to the memory of a human woman he had never met, a woman who had decided that the void would not have the final word, a woman whose descendants still kept faith with her vision. And in that moment, Captain then of the merchant vessel Thermal Wind understood what payment humans truly wanted, not currency or trade or political favor. They wanted others to witness what compassion looked like when backed by power. They wanted to prove that civilization could mean something more than mutual exploitation. They wanted to plant seeds of doubt in every species that calculated the cost of rescue and found it too high. They wanted to change the galaxy one saved, life at a time, one impossible rescue at a time, one kept promise at a time. And from where Thren stood watching them work, it seemed like they just might succeed.